Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Charlie State and Naga Monchetti.
Our headlines today. 10 days in a hotel for anyone returning to the UK from coronavirus hotspots. The government says the new rules will come into force a week on Monday.
More than 1,000 passengers a day flying into places like Heathrow Airport are likely to be affected, but critics say it's too little, too late.
Good morning. Braced for an increase in energy bills. In the next hour, we'll get confirmation of a rise in the energy price cap. I'll explain what it could mean for you.
Looking after children in lockdown, we'll look at the impact being out of school is having on them and parents.
Good morning. 3 Premier League defeats in a row for Jose Mourinho now and Spurs. Yeah, they lose at home to Chelsea, who continued their good start under new boss Thomas Tuchel.
And today, snow only really in northern Scotland, but over the next few days we're going to see snow more widely and all of us are going to feel the bitter chill of an easterly wind. I'll have all the details here on Breakfast.
Good morning, it's Friday, February the 5th. Our top story today, from the 15th of February, UK residents returning from coronavirus hotspots abroad will have to quarantine in hotels for 10 nights.
Now, there has been mounting pressure for ministers to set out details of the scheme, which was first announced last week. The government has been accused of being too slow to act. Simon Jones has more.
A new destination for new arrivals from the most high-risk countries. British nationals returning home from more than 30 Covid hotspots will have to check into designated hotels at their own expense for 10 days. It's to try to stop the spread of new variants of the virus, which emerged in South Africa and Brazil. But Labour says because quarantine hotels won't be introduced for another 10 days, lives will be put at risk.
It is utterly shambolic that this is being brought into effect on the 15th of February. That's over 50 days since the South African strain was first discovered in this country, and little wonder, frankly, that it reached our shores. It is nearly a year since hotel quarantining was introduced in other countries. We are in a race against time.
Quarantine hotels are expected to be set up in 10 locations near ports and airports. Hotel owners will be asked to provide rooms for more than 1,000 new people every day, with guests expected to pay around £80 a night. If anyone wants to leave their room for fresh air, they'll be accompanied by security. The government insists it's working at pace.
When you set up a new system of hotel-based quarantine, we want to make sure that we get this right, so that when people go to those hotels, the hotels are in place, the transport is in place. But it really is important to remember that it is already the case that everybody must quarantine for 10 days. That's required by law.
Discussions have already taken place with more than 60 companies in the hotel and travel industries, but some hotel owners say they've been kept in the dark. The government says the UK has one of the toughest border regimes in the world, but thousands of passengers will continue to arrive from hotspots before the new policy becomes a reality. Simon Jones, BBC News.
Now, let's get more from our reporter Simon Jones, who's outside Heathrow Airport this morning. Simon, this has been long spoken about. We know now a week on Monday is the date. Practically, what does this mean?
Well, there are lots of hotels surrounding Heathrow Airport like this one, and many of those hotels are going to be brought into service by the government for quarantine hotels for British people arriving at airports like Heathrow who need to spend these 10 days in quarantine. How is it going to work? Well, the idea is that passengers will be escorted from the airport to the hotels. They'll be taken to their rooms. They'll be expected to spend their 10 days largely in their rooms. If they need to leave for a bit of fresh air or maybe for a cigarette, they will be escorted by security once again. Now, the government first put forward this idea towards the end of last month, but then it all went a bit quiet. It almost seemed like the idea itself had been put into quarantine. But now, after some pressure, we know it will be the middle of this month that this all begins. The government says it's been talking to its counterparts in Australia and New Zealand, where they've been using the system for many months, but the criticism is, well, this is all a bit late.
Simon, OK, thanks very much. Simon Jones there for us.
A hospital in Ayrshire was placed in lockdown last night as police dealt with what they described as 3 serious incidents. Ambulances were diverted during the 3-hour lockdown of University Hospital Cross House in Kilmarnock. The incidents are not being treated as terror-related.
President Biden has declared that diplomacy is back and the United States will rebuild alliances in his first major foreign policy speech. Mr. Biden said problems such as climate change and armed conflicts could be solved only by working with other nations. He also warned Russia that it would face a much more robust relationship with the US.
Donald Trump has said he will not testify at his Senate impeachment trial, which happens next week. A statement from his lawyers described the proceedings as unconstitutional and said he would not voluntarily give evidence. Democrats accused the former president of inciting insurrection over the attack on the Capitol building last month.
Now, the families of some of the hundreds of patients who died in a Hampshire hospital after being given dangerous levels of powerful painkillers are calling for new inquests into their deaths.
It follows an inquiry 2 years ago which found that more than 450 patients at Gosport War Memorial Hospital had their lives shortened by the drugs, and no charges have ever been brought.
Lawyers for the families have lodged official requests in the hope of setting up a wide-ranging inquest to investigate all the individuals and agencies involved and to consider the causes of death, which could include anything from natural causes to unlawful killing. Duncan Kennedy has more.
For 23 years, Charles Farthing and his wife Anne have asked questions about the Gosport War Memorial Hospital. Charles's stepfather, Brian, died after being given powerful opiate drugs there, which Charles says has never been explained.
Harrowing, quite frankly. Feeling the system is not there to help. It's been actually obstructing the progress towards justice.
In the 1990s, hundreds of patients at the hospital were put on the powerful painkillers. 2 years ago, a Bishop-led inquiry found that 456 patients had their lives shortened by the drugs. Now, lawyers for some of the families say it's time for a Hillsborough-style inquest to reveal what went on.
What we're eventually hoping to trigger is that the chief coroner will agree that that inquest should be held, that they should be held together, that they should be judge-led, and there should be a jury.
Dr. Jane Barton oversaw the administration of drugs at the hospital, but she said she'd been a hard-working doctor doing her best for patients. Relatives are also waiting for a police inquiry to conclude. Detectives are looking into the cases of around 700 patients who are at this hospital and to see whether any criminal charges will be brought in this case. It may take months for families to hear if they will get a new judge-led inquest, but say this is their last hope for justice. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News, in Gosport.
Almost 12 million people in the UK are vulnerable to future heat waves and flooding caused by global warming. That's according to campaigners.
The elderly and those with underlying health conditions such as heart disease are particularly at risk. As Charlotte Wright reports.
Summer heat waves may seem like a distant memory, but scenes like this are becoming more common in the UK as temperatures warm around the world. And when it comes to the nation's health, some say that's a cause for concern.
12 million people within the UK are vulnerable to extreme weather events. Those are being exacerbated by climate change. We must take action now to tackle the health of our planet, and that will help our human health.
The warning comes from a group of more than 140 organisations, including WWF, the National Trust and Women's Institute, who have formed the Climate Coalition. Data collated by the group shows heat-related mortality among the over 65s increased by 21% between 2004 and 2018. It warns it could affect millions more of the elderly or clinically vulnerable in years to come, though it doesn't mention cold-related deaths, which the government says represent the biggest weather-related source of mortality. It's not just temperatures. The report predicts around 2.6 million people could be living in areas with a significant risk of flooding within the next 2 decades, which it says can have a severe mental health impact, saying almost 1 in 3 of those affected suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. Now the group is calling on the government to take more ambitious steps to deal with the issue. The government says the UK is a global leader in tackling climate change, becoming the first major economy to commit to reaching net zero emissions by 2050. Charlotte Wright, BBC News.
The Duchess of Cambridge has praised teachers for being a lifeline to families and has urged them to look after themselves during the pandemic.
She made the comments during a series of video calls with teachers and staff in County Durham who've been taking classes for the children of key workers and supporting home learning.
You're doing a most amazing job. You're a lifeline to so many families out there. So well done. I know it takes an awful lot of effort, energy, patience, but a huge thank you not only for your time today, but also for the hard work you do on a day-to-day basis for the children that you look after. I love the decorations in the background as well.
Always good to notice the background.
I know, we do it a lot here, don't we? Because you're in places you wouldn't normally be, and then you sort of just get a little glimpse.
I know, you get a glimpse inside. It's lovely.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.